Hey, church family. Just wanted to introduce a new series to you. It's called My Hero is Jesus. And you'll be hearing in the next weeks, maybe months, different people in church just sharing something of their story with Jesus. Every one of ours is unique, and yeah, it's all the same Jesus that affects us. It's the same cross and it's the same resurrection that changes our lives. And the reason for doing this is it talks about in Revelation chapter 12 verse 11 that they overcame the enemy. We overcome sin, evil, Satan by two things: by the word of our testimony and by the blood of the Lamb. What Jesus has done for us, the blood of the Lamb, and the word of our testimony, how we've connected to that, how the difference that's made in our lives, that's what it's about. And it's so important at this time that we're hearing these things, that we're soaking in these things, that we're reminded that God is the difference in our lives, that Jesus speaking to us and leading to us and encountering us is the thing, and that's what it's about. And that we're not going to be able to go forward, guys, out of our own wisdom, what we have known in the past, what has worked or what hasn't worked. But it's going to be a time of Holy Spirit, of God leading, of new testimony. So bless you and enjoy this series.
Hi, I'm Lizzy. And I'm going to tell you a bit about my testimony. So I grew up in a Christian home, and reflecting on it, I think my biggest role models were my mum and her parents, my nana and granddad. And they spoke a lot into my life about Jesus and the importance of keeping him at the center of absolutely everything. I remember one time when I was younger, my grandparents used to come and house sit for us, and my nana used to go and clean my bedroom, and as a child this really wound me up. And so I wrote a note and I stuck it on the door of my bedroom that said, "Nana, please keep out of my bedroom. Do not tidy in here." And she wrote a lovely long note back to me. I think I must have been about 8, saying, Jesus says that we should open the door and let people in. And that was just like my grandparents. Every tiny inch of their life was saturated with Jesus. There was nothing compartmentalized with this is my Christian life and this is my working life or this is my other life. And they were so full of grace. And I remember my granddad in particular was so wise and gentle, and I always wanted to be like that. And I always wanted, when I was little, you know, when you imagine who you're going to end up marrying, I wanted to marry someone like my granddad because he was so wise. And John is so much like my granddad, and he even looks like my granddad. But the gentleness with and patience with people. And I think that really reflected Jesus's love, and that's what I wanted to reflect. As I grew up, I don't think I really acknowledged, I don't know when I became a Christian. I'm one of these people that I cannot put a time or a date. I don't think there was a specific time when there was a decision, but I remember when I was 13 and I was at Spring Harvest, and there was kind of a call, like, it was are you going to stand up and be counted? Are you going to tell people at school, at church, the people that you kind of hang out with at the weekends, are you going to tell them that you love Jesus? And at that point, I realized I needed to get baptized. And I did at 13 on Easter Sunday. And I gave my testimony, and it was probably one of the scariest things I've done in my life. And I got baptized with some of the other people in my church, and it was beautiful. But then there was like this big gap in my life after I've made this stand, but I don't really feel like I've gone anywhere until I got to about 18. And just before my 18th birthday, my church did the 40 Days of Purpose. And I think I'd spent the last few years living in this kind of, my Christian life revolved around the bubbles. So there was camp bubble, going camping with my youth group in the summer. There was the spring harvest bubble. And after I'd been to those bubbles, I was like psyched up and like, yes, Jesus, I love you. And then after that, like, it just faded away. And I realized when I did the 40 days of purpose, I read my Bible every day and I prayed every day and I spent time with Jesus every day, and just 40 days. And it completely changed my understanding of what it means to be in a relationship with Jesus, because it just became normal and everything became real, and understanding the Bible just happened so much more when I just read the Bible more. And my relationship with God skyrocketed at that point. I went off to university and I joined the Christian Union, and we were doing outreach, and I was doing all these things that I'd never thought someone like me, this timid little me, could do. I couldn't tell people about Jesus. And I think there have been points when I've really kind of there have been points when I've done it for the sake of doing it, when I've read my Bible, when I've sat down and I've prayed, and it's just been going through the motions. And I would call those kind of like the desert times. And what I realized was, when I've come through the desert times, it's those times that I've spent with Jesus that have sustained me. There was one particular time when, how old was I? I must have been about 21. And I was serving on a kids team in Cumbria, in Keswick. And it was the summer holidays, and I just had my heart broken, like completely smashed to pieces. And I felt like I was nowhere. I felt like I was in the desert, and I was going through the motions, and I decided I couldn't cope. I couldn't cope with the activity that I was supposed to be doing that day. And I went and I sat on a bench in Keswick in the park, and I sat with my Bible open. I had no idea even what passage I was reading. I just flipped it open and read. And I was just sobbing, and all these people walking past must have thought I was a complete nut. And then this tangible presence of Jesus, I really felt the presence of somebody sitting next to me on the bench and putting their arms around me. And words of comfort, and I will be your comforter. And this tangible presence overwhelmed me. And I think before that point, it's when the book knowledge becomes the heart knowledge, and all this stuff that I knew about God and that I'd learned about God, and like Jesus genuinely cared about me in that moment of brokenness, and he sat next to me in that moment of brokenness and put his arm around me, and I knew that he was there. And then when I got back to the dormitories, I found this Bible verse above the bed of the person next to me, and it was the words that had been going through my head, but I'd not paid attention to them before. And it was words from Isaiah about a comforter, and Jesus really was that comforter. And since then, I've really stepped out, and knowing that there's this fine line, this kind of grey area. So when we're reading the Bible, and when we're learning, and when we're putting stuff into practice. And I think since that point, I've learned that life is not so black and white, and there are lots of grey edges. And actually, I need to take time to seek Jesus in the grey edges and in the greyness in the middle. living in Oldham in the absolute poverty, living next door to people who just have nothing, and experiencing that and the life decisions that they make as a result of that. I've learned that life's not so black and white. It's not like you do this or you do that. And learning to have grace with people. And so God's been teaching me a lot about, over the last 15 years, and it takes that long to get through to me, he's been teaching me a lot about putting what I know and the importance of understanding and the importance of really grappling with truth in the Bible, but learning to have grace and to deal sensitively with people and love them the way that he does. And that's what brings us to Highworth, and God called us to Highworth. And when God called us here, we felt passionately that God wanted us to come and teach and disciple people. In fact, when we came into membership, I remember Andrew Wilson wrote down a word, and the word was preach the word. And so we've been faithfully trying to do that for the last few years. But the other word that we had when we arrived in Highworth was that we would be a shelter and a refuge, and to hold those together, to have the shelter and the refuge and the gentleness and the grace, along with the understanding and the knowledge and the base, the rock, to be able to base everything that we do from.